Welcome to the Social Propertypreneur Podcast. And here is your host, social media queen, property investor, and entrepreneur, Laura Muse.
Welcome to the next episode of the Social Propertypreneur with me, Laura Muse. Today I've got a fabulous guest who is going to be sharing experiences of how to build a business and how his business can help you in property. So the guy that I'm interviewing today, at 25 years old, which is amazing, has turned over £250,000 in his first year of business. And he also has raised in excess of £35 million for investors and developers through bridging. He's also got his own PPN event, and he's also got his own podcast, which you must listen to, which is the Property Finance Podcast. And our wonderful guest is Mr. Micheal Primrose. Yay! Hi, Micheal.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Micheal, obviously, you've had an amazing year in business, and would you be happy to share your journey, because it's not always been straightforward. It's been a bumpy road from where you were and how you've got to where you are now, if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I suppose it started about 3 years ago. I got into finance for the first time. So I'd been an ex-conveyancer, then was made redundant, went into finance working for somebody else, which was fine, did very well. Got myself to director level pretty quickly, literally within sort of 6-9 months. Built a really good business there. Turning over sort of good amounts of money. Was there for, it's been about a year and a half, coming on close to 2 years. Decided to leave there and go on my own, which at the time I was, I want to say 23. So I was, 23 and a half. We had a daughter at the time who was coming up to 2 years old. No, 1 year old. And then we had, as I handed my notice in, we found out that we were expecting our second daughter. I've probably got these timelines completely messed up, but anyway, you get the idea. So anyway, I'd left employment at the point where we had the daughter and another daughter on the way, and basically decided to go out on my own. I'd met a couple of guys who I was informed were good people to get into business with at the time, which is fine. We met up, it all went all right. Made the plunge to hand my notice in and say, yeah, you know what, actually going to give this a go. Going to go out on my own. Yeah, it was all right for probably the first 6 months. So it was the point around the time that our second daughter arrived, which was August last year, so August 2018. We'd been in business with the new brokerage we'd set up. Had been in business for probably 6 months at that point, 6-7 months. And at that point, literally everything just went wrong. So Felicity, my second daughter, was born. At that point, just weird things started happening in the business. Couldn't get access to bank accounts. Just started hearing rumours about stuff that was going on. There was some naughtiness in the background. And I call them rumours because to this day, I don't know whether they're true or not. Yeah. So it was at that point where I was like, you know what, something's not quite right here. So at that point, the business pretty much fell apart. That was in the August. So August, September, October. Myself and my wife literally had zero income. We had a newborn baby.
That must have been really scary, having family commitments.
It was bad. Yeah, went to I think it's safe to say went to a very dark place. Yeah. Because literally we'd borrowed money from family, friends, everywhere to try and survive. So we had a 2-year-old daughter at that point, and then a newborn baby. And it was just to the point where we were like, we'd missed rent for 3 months. We lost our cars.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, just literally lost everything at that point.
So really lost everything?
Oh, literally to the point where I think we owed Alice, who's my wife, her mum about 10 grand. We owed my best mate about 7 or 8 grand, I think, at this point. And that was just to keep ourselves afloat for those 3 months. But it just wasn't enough to keep up with all of the payments that we had to make. So come November, I think it was. So it was the start of November. We literally just sat down. This is November 2018. Sat down and went, there's absolutely no way that we can carry this on. Yeah. So that was when we made the decision to start up the Property Finance Guy, which was obviously the brokerage that's going now. I started making sort of connections with new people. Yeah, we're very lucky actually with the start of the brokerage with some of the people that we got involved. got some cases over the line very quickly, cleared a lot of sort of the bad debt that we had at that point. Yeah, and haven't really looked back since. Had some legal issues to get over at the back end of 2018, beginning of 2019, which had come out of the back of when the business had fallen apart. So we had to get rid of that. And I had a lot of people coming to me for advice and sort of chasing me up about stuff that had happened with that brokerage. Nothing to do with me. It was, like I said, rumours had circulated, and it was people chasing things as per these rumours. I'm being very careful not to say, because it's, like I said, it is purely a rumour, and like I said, I've got no idea if it's true or not. So it was a lot of stress at the beginning and start of the business, because obviously we had a lot of debt to clear, and obviously had to sort of try and clear any past connections as well. So it was really, I suppose, January, February, where everything just skyrocketed. We took on the PPN in March. I took on Mentorship with Rob and Mark in March.
Oh, wow. Did that make a big difference to your business, being surrounded by them types of people?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest difference it actually made was having a support network to help with some of the crap that had happened previously. So it's good to have that, to be able to talk to people and say, well, actually, I've got these problems. Can you sort of help? So it was powerful being in that sort of mastermind.
Yeah.
It was good in that sense. And then in March, we also took on our first member of staff, moved into new offices. So it was really March was the catalyst to where we sit now, really. Pretty much all of the business that we've done, has sort of come since February or March.
So since March this year, you've turned over £250,000.
I'd say 220 of that since March. Yeah,
that is very impressive.
Yeah, so it was a mental sort of 6-7 months where literally just everyone was coming to us. The podcast was going live. We got more embedded within Progressive, so we started doing VIP, talking on VIP, emceeing some events. The PPN sort of took off. It's difficult with networking events. It's not always. It's easy going to networking events. It's not easy running a networking event. So that sort of took off a little bit as well, although it's sort of petered out a bit now. But it's since March really has just gone absolutely mental.
You know, when you were at your lowest point, and obviously you'd set up your own business, it didn't particularly work out, a lot of people would have retreated back into employment. What was was that just not an option for you, or what was your thought process around that?
Well, actually, it got so desperate that I'd actually gone for a job as an Amazon driver for the Christmas period to try and bring in some money. Yeah. And it was actually the morning of the induction, where we'd be given all the uniforms and stuff like that I actually had a phone call about a development deal that someone wanted me to fund. And it was one where actually I could get away with charging an upfront fee because of the relationship. And actually it was quite a quick deal to get over the line. Yeah. So it was that point of actually, I was like, well, do I go and do the Amazon job, run the risk of having absolutely no time to do anything? Because the problem with that is if I'd gone into that job, it would have been really long days. I'd have got into this cycle of not actually being able to focus on anything else. So I made the decision, and it was at the beginning of November. And that's when we sat down and said, actually, we need to set up this new business. We need to go at it and just try and get through, really. And happened to be that fate was there to intervene and go, actually, crack on. It'll all be all right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, so obviously, you know, my husband James, he years ago when he set up his first business, he'd like plugged it for months and months and months, invested a lot of money, and nothing was giving. And it was literally, he booked his flights to go to Australia to actually move over there. And the day before he went, he got a call about a job he quoted for 6 months ago, and that was him staying and building his business. So it's amazing how that one phone call or that one email just completely changes your life. Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And that phone call definitely did. Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, I dread to think where we'd be now had I gone into full-time employment. Because there's no way we'd have achieved what we've achieved this year with us in full-time employment. So on a different note, on an advanced note, obviously we're in property, you're the property finance guy, we're property investors. There's a lot of people ask us questions about how we finance our projects. Obviously we work with you on projects that we're currently doing or have maybe done. Can you explain to people how you can help new property investors, property developers, what advice and what services you can offer to them?
Yeah, so predominantly our business is focused around bridging and development finance. We do a bit in the commercial mortgage section, so a bit on HMOs, bit on service accommodation. But I suppose first and foremost, what we try and do and what we've niched ourselves on is more on the side of sort of assisting first-time developers, first-time investors, in order to be more creative with their deals, get the right team around them, just generally be able to raise finance that they personally thought was either unfeasible or unachievable.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that we've helped with, I mean, over the last 3 years, I've had guys who have come to me with like their first flip, for example. And there's a guy we've got at the minute who I helped finance his first HMO, and now he's on to 40, 50 unit developments. And it's like, it's great seeing that journey, but it's also great actually having the relationship with the client so that they come to you with these deals all the way through. So yeah, I suppose what we offer is just that helping hand and a service that people know, like, and trust in order to just hold their hand, get them through the projects, help sort of source the team. Yeah, that's the main thing we help with, really.
So obviously a lot of people are put off bridging from bad bridging stories, and if they run over schedule, obviously they get extra penalties. What would you say to people who have looked at it and kind of dismissed it? What would you like to demystify? Because there's a lot of things around bridging that I think are explained correctly. Yeah. Can you put some clarity on that?
Yeah, so bridging's got a pretty horrendous reputation in the market for being expensive penalty fees if you run over, repossessions, that sort of thing. What I would say in terms of bridging, in the 3 odd years and however many bridging deals we've done, we've never had anyone have a property repossessed, ever. And I don't intend to ever get into that situation either. The repossession rates on bridging are actually pretty slim. I don't know of many people at all that have had properties repossessed through bridging, because actually with it being asset-based finance and the lenders that are involved in that sort of lending space, the process they have to go through to repossess is quite difficult and it's quite lengthy. They're better off just charging more interest and then helping the client to get out of these loans. So what we tend to find is actually a lot of I suppose one of the big things is people say about these expensive exit fees, but actually at the minute, a lot of lenders are getting rid of exit fees when it comes to bridging. So there's actually less lenders now that charge an exit fee than those that do. And similarly with default rates as well, I think they get quite a bad reputation within the market as well. Oh, if you run over, you're going to be on 3, 4, 5% a month. Well, actually, that's not really the case. Most lenders will go up to maybe 2% a month. But actually, if you're communicating with them, then actually what you tend to find is that they're all right. They tend to just let you on for maybe a month or two afterwards, because it's easier to just let that happen, let you get out of the project, rather than try and stick you on some extortionate interest rate, read all the loan documents, that sort of thing. So in that sense, I think a lot of people you see who moan about bridging are people who have maybe taken bridging finance, have then sat and not done anything about it if they've run over, haven't communicated with the lender, and then have had a repossession notice and gone, oh, well, this is out of order. How can they do this? Whereas actually people who are openly communicating with the lenders, with the brokers, keeping everyone up to date, they never really have a problem.
But I think that also comes down to having a good broker. So obviously you communicate with us a lot, explain the process. Would you mind sharing the actual bridging process to maybe somebody who's not done that before?
Yes, I suppose if you took the entire process from the beginning, so you'd submit your inquiry to begin with, what would then happen is the broker then takes them out to market, preferably use a broker who's whole of market so that you're getting all of the options. What you tend to find with a lot of bridging brokers as well is that they're unregulated, because bridging is an unregulated product unless you're bridging against your own home. Okay. In which case that becomes regulated. They tend not to give advice. So us, for example, we're unregulated. We're not regulated to give advice on bridging. We can present the options and then enable you to choose which one you want. So exactly that. So we take it out and we get all of the lenders to come back, obviously negotiate all of the interest rates, try and negotiate arrangement fees, exit fees, whatever it may be, depending on the relationship that we've got with the lenders. And then once that's done, obviously put the options in front of you. You would then look at them and say, okay, well, you might ask some questions. You might, well, Michael, I can see this interest rate's really good. What's this lender? You just go through it in a bit more detail. What's this lender deducting from the day one advance, that sort of thing. And at that point, you then come back and say, okay, well, I want to go with this lender. Let's sort of push the process forward. Then you go through application, valuation, legals, and then into inevitably drawdown. But one thing that a lot of people tend to forget about bridging, and this is just going off on a slight tangent, is that actually when you take a bridging loan, so let's say I'm buying a house for £100,000, bridging could potentially end up 75% of that. but that's actually the gross facility. So what then happens is they take all the interest and fees off you up front. So actually you don't get 75%, you get probably closer to 65%.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that sometimes. And that's what we try and explain when we're going out to market and getting the terms and whatnot. And when we present those terms to you, we give an idea of, well, actually, this is what your deposit is going to have to be. And I always try and manage people's expectations up front that actually you are going to lose some money off of that percentage loan to value. Yeah, that's it really.
Obviously with mortgage, actually getting a mortgage on a buy-to-let mortgage, etc., obviously there's certain criteria. Can anyone get a bridge, or is there certain types of properties that are kind of more lendable against, or can you explain that to people?
Yeah, so with that, I mean, bridging is predominantly, and development finance is predominantly asset-based finance. So they tend to look at the deal before the borrower.
Yeah.
So I would say pretty much everyone can get a bridge. In fact, actually, I'd say anyone can get a bridge. But the caveat to that is if you've got bad credit, if the deal isn't particularly great, actually what you'll find is that you'll be on a higher interest rate than somebody who's maybe got clean credit, a deal that stacks really nicely. Yeah, anyone can get a bridge, but it's whether you're willing to pay the interest rate that you might be on if you're a particularly questionable borrower.
And what about the length term? Obviously, people have their own theories on the length term. Do you obviously advise to lend for longer than you imagine?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I always sort of take a minimum of about a 3-month contingency period. Okay. The reason for that is because if you've got an extra 3 months, it just avoids any chance of you running into the default period or anything like that. Because if you've got that 3-month overrun, at least you know that no matter what, you've got 3 months to get out of it if you need to. Now, obviously, the caveat against that is obviously you're losing the interest up front. So, yeah, you've got obviously all the interest and fees coming off up front. So, obviously, the risk is that if you take it for an extra 3 months, it might deduct too much interest for you to then to be able to stack that deal. So, if that was the case, we'd have to think about how we structure it in order to make it work.
And is there any circumstances where you wouldn't advise people to do a bridge?
The only time I'd advise not to do a bridge is if you... So there you go. I had an example yesterday, actually. So I've got a guy who's bought a property in cash. He's done the refurb in cash. He's now sold the property. So he's going through conveyancing at the minute. So he came to me and said, well, actually, I want to release the funds out of this deal. And I said, well, how long is the conveyancing going to be? He said, well, worst case, 3 months. Okay, well, what's the reasoning behind wanting to take that bridge? Oh, well, I just want to release the funds and just know that I've got the cash available. In that scenario, I wouldn't recommend taking a bridge, because if you're just leaving it in a bank account, you're potentially paying 1% a month interest on it. Yeah. You've paid your 2% arrangement fee, you've paid your valuation, you've paid your legal fees. There's all these fees that you pay for money that you might not necessarily need any earlier than you would have got them anyway.
To come through.
So yeah, in that scenario, what I've said to him is, and we've got him some terms that he's looking over, but what I've said to him is, do not press go on that bridging loan until you need the money rather than want the money.
Yeah.
Because again, the problem with a deal like that is that his profit margin was quite tight. So he's bought it in cash, he's paid cash for the refurb. The profit that he's going to get from the sale isn't humongous at all. The problem with the bridge, even though it's just for 3 months, would wipe a lot of that profit out. It just happens to be one of those projects that's just a bit tight. So for him, it very much needed to be, look, wait for this money to come in, then decide what you're going to do with it. And he'll leverage funds in the future, but I don't think taking a bridge there is the best option. So yeah, we'll always look over a deal and we'll always say to someone, you don't need bridging, you don't need development, you need to go and do this or you need to go and do that. We have got more than enough business coming in that I can turn down business that we don't need to. Because the thing for us is, and it's the same with you as well, is reputation, especially on social media, is such a big thing now, that if I put someone onto a product that they don't need to be on, the first thing they're going to do is put a nasty review online or report me to the FCA or whatever it may be. So I would rather turn it down and say, you do not need this product. Yeah. And then if they want to put a nasty review online about that, then fine.
It takes a long time to build a relationship and seconds to destroy it.
Exactly. And when I told this guy that he didn't need the bridge, he was like, I can't believe you've actually like honestly said to me that not to take it. He's like, this is bizarre. I've spoken to other brokers and they're trying to like force me into it really, really quickly. And you've actually told me to wait. And it is simple though. You with this sort of finance, you need it, not want it.
Yeah.
Because if you want it, it's too expensive, and there has to be a real need for it at that point. Yeah, and the same with vanilla buy-to-lets and things like that. Is if someone's trying to bridge it for whatever reason, we sometimes have to look at it and go, well, actually, you don't need to bridge this. You need to look at the costs, and you just need to go straight onto a mortgage. And okay, the mortgage might go against the purchase price rather than market value, and you might have to put a little bit more money in to begin with. But actually, the bridge is going to wipe out a chunk of the profit. And we do that with clients. It's all about the hand holding and going through it with them and saying that you don't need this product, or yes, you do need this product, or whatever it may be. And we just try to do that with everybody.
Would you mind, obviously we touched on development finance a little bit earlier. Do you mind just explaining a little bit more about development finance, how it works, how it's structured, and how you draw down from that?
Yeah, so development finance, I suppose the first thing to say is bridging finance is only against the purchase. Development finance is against purchase and build, or refurb or conversion, whatever it may be. So development finance is where you're trying to borrow the costs of both the purchase and the build costs. So with development finance, normally on a refurb, for example, you might borrow 70% of the purchase, 100% of the build costs. And sometimes that works out better than bridging against the purchase and then using your own cash for the refurb. But the biggest bit about development finance, and what a lot of people don't realize, is that actually that pot of money towards the development costs is released in arrears. So what that means is you've actually got to do the work and then claim the money back for it. So if I've got a refurb that's 100 grand, for example, I've got to go and spend 10, 15, 20 grand and then claim 20 grand back from the lender. Now, I don't actually need to physically put my hand in my pocket and pay that money over. It could be that I've been invoiced by a contractor, for example. So the contractor might put the foundations in on a new build and then said, right, Mike, here you go. Here's an invoice for 20 grand. I need you to pay this by next Friday. And then I'd go to the lender and say, look, this work has taken place. Here's the invoice. Pay the invoice. And that can get you around the cash flow issues that you might have if you otherwise had to sort of pay it for yourself.
And just on that point, could you do that every month, or is it kind of restricted to certain, like they'll only do it so many times within that project, or is it kind of...
It depends on the lender. I mean, what I would say is that every time you take a drawdown, there's normally a £600-700 fee associated with that. So the risk you run is that if I draw down 5 times on a development at £600, that's cost me £3,000. Now, if I did it 10 times, all of a sudden I'm at £6,000, and it's like, whoa, it's just starting to rack up fairly quickly, especially if there's not a huge profit margin in the deal either. But lender by lender, some will let you draw down whenever you want, and then just obviously apply that cost to it. Some have fixed drawdowns. So some might say you can only have 2 drawdowns, you can only have 3 drawdowns, you can only have 4 drawdowns, whatever it may be. And it just depends on the lender, really.
Cool. Well, it's been lovely speaking to you. Before we obviously finish, what are your plans for next year?
Cool.
You've made massive waves this year. I'd love to be knowing what you're doing next year.
So next year we'll see the introduction of our app. Cool. So we're bringing an app out. It will see probably a bit of expansion around the podcast. We're also going to be moving into new offices next year as well. So we'll be expanding the office, bringing in our own podcast studio and that sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
Just generally trying to beat what we've done this year, really. In all honesty, I haven't had time to sit down and think this is the plan for next year. I'm flying by the seat of my pants a little bit at the minute. So, just a case of just keep doing what we're doing, and just try and get better all the time.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time out to speak to me, and I hope our listeners have got some amazing value, which I'm sure they have. We're going to put some links below, so obviously people can contact you directly. And put a link down to PPM Bank and also your podcast, so people can listen a bit more on how to finance deals. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
So thank you for listening to the Social Propertypreneur, and we will see you all next time on our next episode.